how the cosmic consciousness reveals itself in the thought-like background of atoms. Atoms. Yeah, chemistry. In the 1930s, Sir Arthur Stanley Eddington was the first physicist who systematically pursued the aspect of the spirit in the quantum phenomena. The universe is of the nature of a thought or sensation in a universal mind. He wrote, shocking the scientific establishment and upsetting many of his colleagues. But Eddington was a courageous man, and he arrived at his conclusion in a logically acceptable way. Yes. If something is not acceptable, try to make it in another way so that people can accept your core idea without making any compromise. Measurements in the physics are meaningful. Eddington pointed out, because the measuring instruments are connected with a somehow meaningful background of the things that we measure. Wow. Let me repeat it again, okay? Measurements in the physics are meaningful. Eddington pointed out, because the measuring instruments are connected with a somehow meaningful background of the things that we measure. For example, that was a claim, and I'm gonna tell you an example. For example, when you follow the movements of the light dot in the sky at night, your observations make sense because you know the background that contains the planets revolving around the sun, right? The problem with our measurements of atoms, Eddington said, is that the background isn't known. Why isn't it known? Because it consists of non-empirical forms. Wow! Now we realize, Eddington writes, that science has nothing to say as to the intrinsic nature of the atom. As physics, so neurology. In physics, nothing tells us what is going on behind the visible surface of an atom. In neurology, measurements won't tell us what is going on behind the surface of a brain, right? However, in contrast to atoms, the person behind the brain can talk to us. Yes, that person can tell us that behind the visible surface of the neural networks, there is a mind. There is a mind. Atoms don't talk, but we can put two and two together, right? When we look at the brain, we see the electric activities of its neural networks, and we know that there is a mind behind them. So Eddington asked, why not link the two together, the atomic and mental? Wow! Deductiveness, right? This is inevitable conclusion. After you do equivalent transformation of the axiom of the premise, right? Since we have to find something to which we attach the measurement of an atom, why not then attach it to something of the spiritual nature of which a prominent characteristic is thought. Wow. No question mark, period. And he continues, it seems rather silly to prefer to attach it to something of a so-called concrete nature inconsistent with thought, and then to wonder where the thought comes from. Yes, where the thoughts come from. Yes, that's right. The last part of this statement is remarkable. It can be understood to imply that we can have thought in our mind because something aching to thought already exists in the background of atoms. Wow! It can be understood to imply that we can have thought in our mind because something aching to thought already exists in the background of the atoms. With this, Eddington brings the unity of the universe into play, proposing that behind all empirical appearances, there is a background continuous with the background of the brain. Wow. By unity, he doesn't mean a holistic universe in which all things are interconnected. He simply means that the universe is a coherent system whose elements are compatible with one another. He arrives at this concept by the experience of the unity of our mind. If unity of a man's consciousness is not an illusion, there must be some corresponding unity in the relations of the mind stuff, which is behind the measurements. How exciting is that? From our inner sense of the unity, we infer the unity of the universe. The argument is that if the universe was nothing but a pile of broken pieces of the debris that didn't fit together, the unity of our mind would be impossible. Likewise, analogy, right? If the cosmic background is continuous with the rest, we can conclude from our own mind that the background of the reality has mind-like properties. Yes. The other day, one of our friends had a birthday party, and somehow the conversation turned to Eddington's mind stuff. My friends were polite, but they weren't convinced. "Are you telling us," one of them said, lifting her glass of wine, "that we are drinking salts?" Yes, it is. Yeah, you know. Yes and no, I replied. When we drink a nice glass of wine, it isn't the same as thinking about it, but the salt-like principles inside the molecules in your glass are responsible for the taste that you like. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So sexy, huh? So what does it mean that atoms have a salt-like background? It means exactly the same that it means for you and me. You have a body, you can touch it, but you also have a mind that isn't tangible. Yes. Of course, atoms have a mass, and it is a combination of the masses that you taste when you have a glass of wine. But what Eddington is saying is that atoms also have an inside that is salt-like. Really? And the wine wouldn't taste the same without it. Because of the mind-like background of the things, we begin to think that the universe, too, has an inside and outside. Wow, there is a border, right? The point is that matter isn't the only thing. There is something else. In previous parts of this book, we called it the virtual order. The consistency or homogeneity of the reality is that it has the same structure throughout, mind-like inside and material outside. Where there is a matter, there is a form. Eddington warns us not to get carried away when we accept that an atom has a nature capable of manifesting itself as a mental activity. It is easy to attach the detail to this concept that don't apply. For example, Eddington says, we mustn't attribute to the background of atoms the more specialized attributes of the consciousness. But, he continued, that isn't needed to make it compatible with the nature of our mind. In this way, step by step and carefully, Eddington is led to the conclusion that the stuff of the world is a mind stuff. He hastens to add that the terms mind and stuff ain't perfect, but they are the best that he can use to describe the situation. The mind stuff of the world is, of course, something more general than our individual conscious minds, but we may think of its nature as not altogether foreign to the feeling in our consciousness. Above, we suggested that matter, energy, and form are equivalent. Yes, equivalent. Right? Everything is transformable, right? In this equivalence, the forms are primary in the sense that the ETs leave the realm of matter and enter the realm of forms whenever they are on their own. Moreover, The material structures of the empirical world seem to be secondary also because they are actualizations of the forms. In this case, what really counts is the mind stuff of the universe. Mind matters. Eddington was fully aware that his approach is alien to physics. It is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of the everything is of the mental character. But we don't have a choice because there are no two avenues of approaches to an understanding of the nature of reality. We have only one approach, namely, through our direct knowledge of mind. Consciousness is not sharply defined, but fades into the subconsciousness, and beyond that we must postulate something indefinite, but yet continuous with our mental nature. This I take to be the world stuff. The strength of this view is its consistency with the quantum phenomena. We compare the mind stuff to our conscious feelings, Eddington concludes, because now that we are convinced of the formal and symbolic character of the entities of the physics, there is nothing else to liken it to. Wow.